my tongue. He is Lord of Linda. He is Lord of this church, of our community, of our state, and our world. Sometimes, I don't know, when you listen to the news and you hear all these things, a big star again last night died, don't you become overwhelmed hearing all that? And yet we can rely on Jesus as Lord of all. And just lastly, God gave me this. Normally I teach from a different passage, but I had to keep it within my 7 minutes. And so I was like trying to wean it down, and it wasn't working. And then God brought me to this passage, and then on my next day off, he like helped me write everything out. And then CB got home that night, and I'm like, I'm really nervous, and I don't know if it's going to go, and how am I going to get all this in 7 minutes, and blah, 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 blah. And he told me some very good advice, but I didn't want to hear it. I know none of you wives ever do that, but I didn't want to hear it, and he knew it. The next morning, I'm driving along, and I'm thinking about God being Lord of all, and I'm like, He was over your study time. Isn't He going to be over your Sunday morning too? And I had to just realize that Jesus was Lord of all, even this morning. So I hope that it does for you what it's done for me. It really makes Jesus personal, and it makes Him right there, and I hear His voice. So that's my prayer for you, that you have the same experience. And I would really challenge you, use this. Try it, please. Okay?
Stay up here. Stay up here. Go back, Kim. So, Linda, I know I'm going to keep you up here for a few more minutes.
This doesn't count as my 7.
No, well, we're already at 11, so we're okay. No, just go back, Kim. Okay, go back to his like this passage.
Okay.
Like if you had more time, look in this verse by verse. Like, could you probably pick up like in the days of Abiathar, the high priest?
Absolutely. That'd be a great one to look up who Abiathar was. Actually, those cross references that I put up, the 1 Chronicles and 1 Samuel and everything, they give that story of Abiathar.
Which is?
David was being hunted by Saul, the king at that time, and he and his men had to run because otherwise they'd be killed by the king. But they ran without taking any provisions. But in the tabernacle that they had at that time, there was always showbread, and it was just bread that the people offered to God, and it sat there, and then when it was a day old, the priests would eat it. But David ran in and said, "Have you anything?" And Abiathar says, "I don't have anything but the showbread." And David said, "Okay, I'm going to eat that." And he and his men ate it.
Okay, so then that just even for me, and maybe for everybody else, shows the final conclusion that you had is that Jesus is Lord of your life, even this morning.
Right.
And David sees that He's Lord of his life, and the priests had to learn that too.
Right.
That Yahweh God was Lord of what they were doing.
Right.
Yeah. So you have that. You have the consecrated. You have the whole Sabbath. Can you go to the next one, Kim? Just briefly, the Sabbath was made for man, for women, not man for the Sabbath, and Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath. Has that sort of changed some of your thoughts about Sunday?
It does.
And again, I want to ask you these questions for you all to see. This verse-by-verse study can really get you into the
God's
application.
Word, yes, and what we do with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of funny because I like to hang on to tradition, and CB prods my thinking a lot. We're good for one another. Iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. I like to hang on to the traditions of my past, and being brought up in the Reformed Church, we really didn't do anything. Like could go to the lake and we could soak our feet by sitting on the dock and putting our feet in, but we couldn't walk in the water and we couldn't swim. And so, some things I like to hang on to from the past, but really, truly, if God has given me the Sabbath, then how am I going to use that day to glorify Him? It's not just for me to use selfishly, but it's to give Him back. Sometimes I do need rest because I get cranky without my rest. So sometimes it needs a day of rest.
He didn't respond over there. He's sitting like a rock.
good, but He better than anybody knows.
However, that we are known now sometimes to wait for it.
Well, times have changed,
Yep.
and I've realized what God is telling me. But it's not just. Sometimes recreation is what is needed. Sometimes it's rest. Sometimes it's recreation. Sometimes it's doing for Him. It does vary.
But then it sounds like for what you're saying is, you get down to the last one there for her, Kim, that Jesus is Lord. What you see within these verses, verse by verse, He's Lord of your life totally. Yeah. Hopefully that's a good illustration for all of you to how to go verse by verse. Hopefully it gives you all a good idea. Thank you very much, Linda. Appreciate it.
No.
So just a short little synopsis, if you can go to the next screen, Kim. The Great Roadmap. Pick up the Bible, you say, wow, here's a great place I want to read. You do a devotional study. Lead that into the book background. Do the survey, do the synopsis, do the summary, do the chapter. Look verse by verse, what Linda just did. Wonderful way to go, verse by verse. Pick out a word in that verse. Pick out a character. Or a character quality. Pick out a character individual. Do a theme and do a topical. I love what Linda had to say. If Eli Manning, he said something about if he didn't think he could read or didn't think he could do the passes, and I thought right away too, if he didn't know the playbooks. If any quarterback in the professional leagues or any player doesn't know the playbook, they can't play the game. They got to know their playbook. And they got to know their own team's playbook. It's good to know the other team's playbook, but they got to know their own team's playbook. It's going to pick up my Bible. This is our playbook. The Bible is our playbook. And the only way we can know it is when we get into it and read it. So my prayer is that all of you, and some of you this past week, I've talked with you and you've said, wow, Pastor, look, I'm doing this. Wow, look, I'm trying this study. Wow, I'm doing this study. And that does my heart good. Warms me to know that you're growing in your desire to look at God's love letter for what He has to say to you. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Please arise for the prayer blessing.